this evening, very smart people, to help us puzzle through some of these questions. I think one of the biggest pieces of wisdom we've gotten so far this evening is getting the question right. And so I think as we prepared for this conversation, thought that it would be very interesting to actually start with the things that they are aiming big data and analytics against. But let me actually introduce the panel first. So right next to me here, Brian Sudhoff is one of the co-founders of Localytics. Rama Ramakrishnan is the founder and CEO of C-Quotient. Bill Simmons, co-founder of DataZoo. And then Ben Clark is senior architect and director over at Wayfair. So a really interesting group. I thought maybe a way to get started here would be to actually ask each of them to tell us a little bit about their different firms and their responsibilities there before we dive in, so everybody has a sense for where they're coming from with all this. So, Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about Localytics?
Sure, thank you. So, there we go. So Localytics is a mobile analytics and marketing company. We focus primarily on apps. That's not exclusively mobile, actually. So they show up on, over-the-top boxes like Roku and Xbox and things like that, but predominantly for phone and tablet. And essentially what we do is we get embedded into those apps and we help our customers understand how those apps are being used, who's using them, the things that they're doing in the app, the articles they're reading, videos they're watching, products they're buying, et cetera. And then basically as they gain insights and understand who those users are, then segment them and then engage and nurture them and help them move towards whatever conversion their particular app is. So, back to Judah's talk, really trying to help our customers build better apps and then move their customers through the funnels that they have in their own apps.
Hi, great to be here. I'm founder and CEO of C-Quotient. C-Quotient is a company that offers a real-time platform for retailers. And what the platform does is to help the retailer personalize each and every interaction the retailer has with their millions of customers and prospects. By interaction, I mean things like coming to a website, opening an email, firing up a mobile app, entering a store and approaching a sales associate and asking for help. So you can imagine interactions could be many things. So the challenge is to personalize every one of those interactions in real time at scale across millions of people, and do so in a way that's actually relevant and useful to the customer. And we do this by sort of harnessing two things. One is, of course, big data, and I'll talk more about exactly what kinds of big data we use later on. And the second element we harness is high-scale machine learning. There's been a revolution in machine learning over the last several years, and we sort of harness that, couple it with big data, and help it to really shape customer behavior.
Hi, I'm Bill Simmons, CTO and co-founder at DataZoo. DataZoo is a digital marketing management company. Our job is to keep the internet free. So everybody loves the internet, loves the memes. You think it all runs on cute cats, but it's actually run on marketing. And so we help our clients, mostly big brands and agencies, run video ads, display ads, mobile ads, Facebook ads. We provide analytics on their behalf, and we help them optimize their ad spend across these different channels and better understand their customer. And thanks for inviting me here.
Hey there. I'm Ben Clark, a senior director of software engineering at Wayfair. And I wear a few hats there, but one of the things I do once in a while is do and support marketing analytics. And all those of us who do any of that at Wayfair are a little bit plagued by self-doubt, because before anyone started doing any kind of sophisticated marketing analytics of the type that we now do, Wayfair was already growing between 30 and 80% a year, and we have managed to not stop them from continuing to do that during our time there in the last few years. So we're very proud of that, and we're going to try to keep not messing that up over the next few years. So that's it for me.
Terrific. All right, thank you. One of the things we found in doing panels like this before is it's useful to sort of start sometimes with like how different folks came to focus on the problem that they're currently tackling? Like, what was the insight? What was the story of how they got there? And so, Rama, as maybe the dean, if I might, of this group here, and since you're, let's see, a recovering McKinsey consultant whose therapy has included building and successfully selling Profit Logic, teaching at MIT, and now founding a new company, thought we might ask you to start by telling us a little of the story of like how you came to focus on the specific opportunity you found now. What is the unsolved frontier that you feel is worthy of your effort at this point? Yeah.
Caesar, is dean a euphemism for old?
Look, you can take it however you like.
So, I've been in the analytics space for a very long time, from well before it was hot and fashionable. I got my start at American Airlines at Sabre, where I was part of the team that built the first generation of pricing and yield management systems. So when you sit next to someone who paid twice as much as you did, I'm partly to blame. And I've applied analytics in a variety of industries. I was with McKinsey for many years. And I've been in retail for the last 10, 15 years or so. At Profit Logic, which was the previous retail company that was involved in, the focus was really sort of taking all this data, sales and inventory data at the store SKU level, and then trying to tease price elasticity signals from it in a reliable, scalable way. And so we did it successfully. We sold the company to Oracle. But I was sort of plagued by this sort of voice in the back of my head which said, all this is great, but we are not really looking at anything from a customer's point of view. And it sounds sort of simple, obvious motherhood and apple pie-ish, but adopting the customer point of view in the way you look at data and the way you apply the data to decisions is actually non-trivial. It's actually really difficult to pull off. And so C-Quotient was really founded with the premise that we should make it super easy for retailers to infuse the customer's view into every decision they make. So the C in C-Quotient is customer, so CQ, IQ, EQ, you get the idea. So what we do at C-Quotient really is, when we looked at sort of what are the obvious, sort of the proverbial low-hanging fruit, personalization jumped up. Not because it hasn't been done. We have all been personalized too extensively over the last 15, 20 years, so it's hardly a new idea. But what we found is that it's really easy to do personalization, and it's really hard to do good personalization. And so when I spoke to retailers, it became clear that if you're not Amazon, if you're not a grocery store, if you're not a drugstore, if you're sort of an average apparel retailer or a fashion retailer, you have a huge problem. And the problem is that the average customer shops between once and twice a year. The average is about 1.2 to 1.3. So basically what that means is that more than half your customers have shopped exactly once in the last year. That's number one. Number two, the products that you sell keeps changing through the course of the year. So the traditional idea of people who bought this also bought that just doesn't work. Because I showed up 6 months ago, I bought something. Someone showed up yesterday, bought something. The products are not even the same. So the commonality between people is basically close to zero. So we decided that to solve this problem, you have to sort of abstract at one level and do a whole bunch of other complicated things to extract meaning from this data and then drive it into really high-quality personalization. And that is the problem that C-Quotient solves.
That's actually very helpful, and we'll come back to exactly how you're doing that in a moment. I want to maybe ask Bill for a second. So Bill, on page 124 of your doctoral thesis, there is a picture of a lunar lander. So you know the one I'm talking about, right? So
I hope I
good, excellent. So as somebody who also attempted to draw a rocket ship on his thesis and it wasn't as well received by my reviewers, I'm tempted to ask you how you got away with that. But actually, the question I really want to ask is how you go from that and what parallels there were from the kinds of things you were looking at around architecture decision graph thinking, and how you got to data zoo from modeling lunar outposts.
Sure. Yeah. So what he's not telling you is I have a PhD in aerospace engineering, which seems like a odd beginning to a career in marketing. But I've always had a bend towards computing, software, and automation. I remember as a kid, as Cub Scouts visiting the post office, like a 1980s post office, no computers, but just being amazed. I was thinking about this. Oh, we're going to the post office. Going to the post office. I was fascinated by how they get the mail to go to all the right places every day, and it turns out they had this little scheme of like little check marks along all these bins. It was totally fascinating. I'm sure it's much more boring now that everything comes sorted and then they just go door to door. But But I've always had an interest in automation. And even I worked for a while at Lockheed Martin, and we had a lot of tedious things we had to do. I was a control and guidance engineer, but I spent a lot of my time just looking at the output of simulations. So basically analytics on the software, just flipping through charts. And my job was to see if anything weird was in any chart. Just chart by chart by chart by chart. And I did this for like maybe 20, 30 hours a week. It was horrible. So I decided to automate the whole thing, and I, before the charts were printed, because they always hand me the stack, here, junior engineer, look at the charts. Like, I wrote code to automatically check everything and spit out a report, and it took me about a week to write that, and I automated half the team's job. I said, wow, which I thought was amazing, and I was all excited about it, and then, of course, no one liked me. But anyway, I've always had this fascination with automation. Studying aerospace, we were designing a methodology to automatically design Mars missions and Moon missions, a way to go through the combinatorial space and using a combination of branch and bound search and sort of functional evaluation as you go. And we use this to very quickly analyze the whole space of all the different kinds of Mars missions. That's the architecture decision graph work. And produced 1,162 Mars missions and kind of went to NASA with these after we'd been in competition with 11 other companies who all came with one mission. We came with 1,000. And we were able to explain what's the low-cost mission, what's the low-risk mission, what's the high science mission. But what NASA really wanted is, do you have one with a lot of components that we can build in a lot of congressional districts? Which was just really depressing as an engineer to hear that, but that's what motivates things. So anyway, the results were very, very powerful. I ended up getting a PhD, and we talked about we should form a company based on this kind of approach, and we did. And it was before the financial crash, so we were able to raise money based on no business plan. And we looked at a lot of different ideas, and one of our early employees is actually here, Gary, who's now doing very well for himself. But we looked at airline planning problems. Turns out a very bad market. Finance, healthcare, and we came across marketing. And at the time, real-time bidding was becoming apparent. This ability to, in real time, buy ads in an auction marketplace. And so we started applying the technology there, and things grew very rapidly. And it's been an exciting run.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Brian, let me ask you actually to tackle the same question. Sort of, what's the founding, the founding story around how you came to focus on the precise issues you're facing right now?
Sure. So ours is a little more down to earth, if you see what I did there. But we, so we basically, the company started and had a pivot early on, but started with the idea of, as we saw apps, we all have, a lot of us have a mobile background, at least half the founding team, the other half kind of deep in big data, file systems, technology. So firm believers in mobile and the impact mobile would have and apps and how they would change the world and so on. So we thought we'll build one of those. So we started working on different ideas that we had for apps. And as we went through that process and we're thinking about how to actually manage that and make that app better and market the app, et cetera, realized that there really weren't any tools out there to do that. There were a lot of web tools that didn't actually port very well to the app model and the app space. So we did kind of the, instead of digging for gold, we sold shovels. So we decided to go out and build some really great tools and systems. And now all the app developers, well, not all of them, but many of the app developers are our customers. So it's been a really great pivot for us in the space. Obviously, as most people in this room probably have a smartphone by now, as well as maybe an iPad and a Roku at home. Right, the space is starting to continue to explode, and it's been a lot of fun.
Terrific. I'll pass that down to Ben. And so Ben, for you, folks who happen to be on any particular winter snowy morning, strolling up and down Huntington Avenue, sometimes stopping off at the Pavement Coffee House there, will spot Ben and me just casually chatting about Markov clusters and things like that, right? He's the one with the bag over his head, who's a little bit embarrassed to be seen with me. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the how you would characterize some of the frontiers of challenges that you're currently looking at Wayfair. Sort of again the sort of the way that you're uniquely sort of distinguishing your approach to retail that then is the focal point for all your big data and analytics efforts.
I'm actually I'm on a program of kind of self-discipline and penitential mortification relative to sophisticated approaches to things. I'm on a sort of radical program of keeping it simple, stupid, because when I do these more advanced approaches, they don't always work out. You know, I actually measure the results, and I'm honest with myself enough to recognize when I've failed utterly. So, you know, if I can go back to sort of the reason I am gainfully employed at Wayfair is that most things at Wayfair, the new things that we do for a long time, so it's starting to change a little bit, but they followed a simple pattern. Steve Conine, hacker, founder of Wayfair, one of two founders, with the guy who's a hands-on computer programmer, hacks up something over a weekend or, you know, a couple days at the office, and he doesn't just hack up a prototype and then hand it to the rest of the engineers for implementation. He actually codes it, pushes it out, and it works. But then he asks people like me to, maybe it's not working exactly the way he wanted or is not completely finished, so, take a little more scientific approach. So when I first started there, I did absolutely the simplest sort of recommendation style system you could possibly imagine, and got the best single result I've ever gotten there from that day to this. So I've been trying to improve on that and failing for 2.5 years.
Horrible to peak young, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then we've done these fancy things with fancy names like Markov clusters. That makes me. I wrote a blog post about that. It makes me sound really smart. I'm dining out on that one for a while now. But that actually wasn't quite as successful as that first really simple one. So Judah talked about preferring A/B testing to multivariate testing. I got to say, I prefer A/B testing to multivariate testing. And when you're working in the e-commerce space, you often have these, you have these sort of grand designs for things like personalizing on style, which we're doing. We're getting some results from it, but nowhere near as compelling results as we got from turning the little cart icon in the upper right-hand corner of Wayfair's homepage and other pages to Los Angeles Laker colors, which are more visible than the colors that were there before. So that, that's a very simple idea, but we measured that and it was awesome. Let me hang with you for a second there and ask you, so, what I wanted to start with here is the softball question for each of you in a sense, which is for each of you to talk about the a win, some insight that you came to that had made a big difference either to the results of your own firm or to some client's firm, and I wonder if you could take us through how you came to that result, right? So maybe just start by describing, quantify if you can, the result that you came to, either on behalf of the firm or on behalf of a client, and talk a little bit about the process of hypothesizing what value might be there, how you went about testing, validating that, putting it into production, the whole analytics cycle relating to that a little bit. So, of course, and do that in about 15, 20 seconds. Yeah.
So,
well, I think it's it's pretty simple for people in e-commerce to talk about the compelling results that we have. As I said, we do some pretty interesting experiments, but the ones that really provide business value can be evaluated with very, very simple mathematics. E-commerce businesses like ours are basically the amount of money that we make is a function of traffic and conversion rate and average order value. And we design, as simple as possible, but not simpler, as Einstein said, experiments to try to maximize either conversion rate or average order value or traffic, and leave the others where they are, or at least not hurt them. Maybe do two at once, but don't get too ambitious. So I've essentially already describe that, right? We turned the cart icon Los Angeles Lakers colors, and it was it was pretty good. You know, turning the nav blue was pretty good as well. Almost anything that I could say is going to fit into the same pattern. Now we rebranded 2 years ago. That was a big bet by the owners of Wayfair. It involved a year in which we grew less than we had historically, and then we came sort of charging back the next year. So we are certainly measuring, you know, cohorts of people, thinking about acquisition costs and customer lifetime value, and, you know, seeing improvements along those lines. But I'm, you know, for advice for people starting companies, I'd say keep it simple and focus on that. And I think these guys are going to have so much more interesting things to say.
Bill, on to you. Pick a big win and tell us how you got there.
Yeah, this is going to sound controversial, I guess, but the thing I realized recently is that nobody's got time for analytics. It was like, well, he agrees, but I mean, we produce a lot of good results for people, and then they don't use it. It's like, it's very frustrating. But the big realization that I had is like, why do I expect them to? They don't have time. So I think, you know, when I was asked for a leadership quote for this talk, I said, big data analytics is coming to an end. You need big data action, right? Getting back to your smart data comment. But one of the things we've realized is that, and I've been the last 6 months working pretty hard on this, is that we need more automation in the interpretation and like actually taking action on the analytics. The customers all ask for lots and lots of controls and knobs, but then they say, well, what do I turn? So we provide, how do I turn these knobs? We provide all this analytics. It's right there. It's on a dashboard. It's like, those are the knobs you need to turn. It's obvious. But they don't do it. They don't have time. They're scared to do it. They don't know how to interpret it. They don't want to check every day. So what we've done is we have lots of media optimization algorithms, but now we've built an algorithm that turns the knobs on the algorithms. And it turns out that you know, it's not doing anything that a human couldn't do with diligent attention. But when we ran the tests, it turned out that we got 40% better performance by automatically interpreting the analytics for people. That was like sort of the big aha moment for me. It's like, people just don't have time for this. Like there's a lot of people that have built big data analytics, and they're pumping out reports like crazy, and they're interesting, but it's very hard to do anything with it because people are busy. So and then they may make mistakes. So I think, you know, the next step, the next evolution is putting these things in action, which can be scary and dangerous because if it's misinterpreted by the computer, it can go crazy. That's the hard part about it, but that's where things have to go.
It's fairly deep. Rama, how about you? An example of a program or a campaign that really did really well.
Before I sort of talk about it, I just wanted to say I'm in violent agreement with Bill. Because I see so much data pouring out of all kinds of places that people forget about actionability, because it's actually figuring out how to act on something is really hard. It requires judgment, creativity, and a whole bunch of stuff that's not easily available. And so I think that's the reason for that. All right, so I talked about how personalization is easy to do, but good personalization is hard to do. So the challenge we tried to crack, and which we successfully cracked, is the following, right? So people who shop once or twice a year don't have anything in common. So how do you find commonality? So the hunch we had was, and we tried a lot of different things, to Ben's point, very few ideas actually work, so you got to try a lot of stuff before you find anything that works. This idea actually worked after a lot of trial and error, and that was, we said someone comes to the store 6 months ago and buys a sweater, let's say, right? That's all you know about them. You don't know anything else. What could you possibly tease out of that little piece of information? So what we realized is that a sweater is not just, product ID 2349. A sweater is actually a lot of different things, and the website that actually sells a sweater has a very lovingly created merchandise description created by the person who decided to carry that sweater. So it might say things like, here's a cashmere sweater, sheep from Ankara, all kinds of stuff like that. Very flowery language, flirty, bohemian, artsy, preppy, you name it. All adjectives, it abounds in, really interesting adjectives. That was one interesting source of data that we had not thought of previously. The other source of data was customer reviews. The way customers review a product, they use certain words, certain adjectives, certain attributes, which are often not even present in the description of the product from the person who decided to carry the product. So we took these two sources of information, we ran text mining on it, extracted some interesting attributes, and then we used them to figure out, can we actually use this to make personalization recommendations better? Turns out you can. Because even though, Caesar, you and I may have both shopped at J.Crew in the last year, we may not have bought anything in common, but perhaps if you look at the attributes, it becomes clear that we both like stripes, we both like blue, we both like spread collar, we both like flat front pants, and so on and so forth. So by using these attributes, we were able to sort of helicopter up one level and sort of bridge this data scarcity gap. And that has actually proven to be really effective in personalizing for what I call low-frequency retail, such as fashion and apparel retailers. And the most notable example of a recommendation that we saw in the beginning was someone bought a dress, and then we recommended a dress from a completely different part of the merchandise hierarchy, and we were like, this has got to be a bug. This doesn't make any sense. And then you look at the reviews, both products were referred by people saying, this is great for a night in Vegas. Right? So that's not showing up in the description anywhere. And it turns out by using this approach, we were able to move the needle relative to approaches that did not take that into account.
Let me just say, I think one thing I'd follow up on there is where I expected you to go was to go one step further up in the funnel, to look at browsing behavior, what people actually may have looked at but not bought, looked at frequency, because deeper in the funnel, even fewer people than buy review, right? So arguably the data sparsity is even a bigger problem there. But that's an interesting, I imagine you're also doing things with that upper funnel behavior as well.
It's just that most people actually are, you don't have much data about them. Yeah. You only know they came and bought once. If you have browsing data, we'll absolutely use it. It's for those, the majority of people for whom you have nothing. Yeah. And the other thing I want to say is, it's not that you had to write a review for us to use the data on you.
Right.
You write a review, it's going to be used for me.
Yeah, interesting. Brian, what's an example of an insight that somebody applied, somebody got to via Localytics that really kind of transformed or revolutionized a marketing program that they're trying to drive?
Sure. So definitely agree everybody's busy. So we focus on trying to make the marketing programs customers run for their apps automated. So in terms of an insight, we do, a lot of our customers are in media and entertainment. They're keeping track of what articles people are reading and videos they're watching, or they're in commerce and keeping track of products that people are viewing or buying. As an example from media, a lot of them make some of their revenue from advertising, at least a part of it from advertising, so they want to continue that engagement. They want to continue getting to know their customers better or their viewers, readers, and building out those profiles. And so one thing a customer of ours found in their analytics would make it very easy to collect all this data and then segment it, was that if somebody adds like a favorite team, a few favorite teams to their profile, then they are many times more likely to remain a kind of long-term user of the app, right? So apps overall, just as a quick stat we pulled out over the years, about 22% of the time people download apps and only use them once. Right, so if you can get somebody to download an app and start to engage with it, maybe they read a story or two, they add a favorite team, maybe two favorite teams, they're now somewhat invested, they end up being retained for far longer. So what we did is we built an automatic campaign that basically said, as soon as we see somebody read a few stories about the Red Sox, and we can time bound that too, so maybe they have to read 3 stories in a week or something, then we deliver a message to them that basically says, wow, you seem to really like the Red Sox, why don't you add them to your favorite teams? And that just makes it even easier for the end user to basically start to personalize their experience, keeps them coming back, has the added benefit of that being kind of combined or added to the user's profile. So now, that publisher starts to understand, what time of day you tend to engage and what kind of things you read about and how you read and what your favorite teams are, and drives future ad and marketing strategy. So it's kind of a little bit of a gift that keeps on giving, and it's if you automate it, then it's not actually that much work either.
Terrific. Let me switch gears actually, and you know, we talked about the wins, but I'm also equally interested in things that that didn't work out. There may have been hypotheses you had about something that might have been a good idea, and maybe put it to the test, and it didn't pan out. To what degree could each of you comment, maybe in a kind of post-mortem way, on what was it about the analytic process that sort of broke down? And maybe sometimes just a question of just chance, and you know, certain number of trials don't work. But to what degree can you sort of abstract out of that some lessons about when an analytic process might be flawed that leads to you know, an experiment that doesn't pan out? Brian, you want to maybe tackle that one first? And
it's a great one to do first. Well, to save any kind of customers or users of the product from embarrassment, I'll talk about one of our own. So when we launched the company, premium models were very popular, so we thought we'd try that too. And being an analytics company, we thought, well, who better than us to have a kind of a free service and then higher tiers of service, and you know, we'll be good enough to go back and mine those free users and find the ones that are really engaged and really promising, and upsell them through the process. And later what we found is that really didn't work for us. And I actually don't think, maybe it was a placing too much hope in the analytics in that case rather than kind of business sense, because I think the analytics were just fine, but what we found is that the customers were segmented in such a way that no amount of analytics or marketing that you applied could return, kind of had an ROI that was good enough to make it worth having this set of freemium users, hoping that some of them would convert and move over at a later time. So maybe more of a lesson around the application of analytics to meet certain business goals.
Oh, that's great. Rama, you want to?
I have lots. How much time do we have? So, you know, there's an example, perhaps the most sort of memorable one in my experience was from Profit Logic. So Profit Logic built price optimization systems. And so our flagship product was, you know, if people buy a lot of product, this product is often seasonal, short-lived. It's produced a year ahead of schedule because it comes from the Far East. So it arrives at the stores, and some products sell really well. You don't have a problem. Other products just don't sell well. So you need to mark down the price and get rid of it. So we developed a solution for this, and then we had the obvious thought, which is, gee, if people just bought better, we wouldn't have this problem. Because if you buy badly, you have all this bad product that needs to be marked down and cleared. So we built a product which actually helps optimize the buying decision, right? So this is a fantastic product. It had the latest, greatest hierarchical Bayesian econometric modeling and what have you, right? It did a really nice job of forecasting demand for really hard to forecast products, fashion products. And we proudly went into the market, and it completely failed. And the reason it completely failed, actually, can anybody guess? So you may be thinking this, and perhaps you're just not saying it. The reason it failed is because it really questions the self-esteem of the merchant, right? These are all people who are paid to exercise their golden gut. Right? They have a feel for the fashion world. They have a feel for the pulse of the customer. And here we are, right? Bunch of guys from MIT, rocket scientists, clearly don't know how to dress well, who come into their offices and tell them, oh, we have some software which is going to tell you how many units you're going to sell in the Burlington Mall Gap store of this black cashmere sweater at $24.99. Right, we're going to tell you that a year ahead of schedule.
And on top of that, you're telling them that they don't need to go to the Milan runway shows and so forth because
we thought that, but fortunately we didn't say that. Not that it would have changed the outcome any. And we had complete organ rejection. People hated the product. They found all kinds of reasons why it was a bad idea. And so we basically, it was a complete failure. We dropped it and we went back to markdown optimization and promotions and so on. But that perhaps was the most sort of chastening experience of my analytic career.
Yeah, these are always hard questions to answer. But it's like the interview question. Tell me your biggest mistake. Like, how did you learn from it? Now, we recently did a test. We were trying to prove, basically based on I had no way of knowing if this would work or not, and it ended up not working. But we tried to intensely show videos for a pretty small e-retailer in Germany, in different regions of Germany, and test whether the videos would have a positive effect on search activity, which would eventually lead to people buying things. And in the end, it turned into this huge analytic mess because it was right at Christmas season, so they have totally biased results where things are ramping up anyway. The volume of the buy was so small that it was in the noise, and we were stuck because they had already gotten so excited about this test that they wanted to go talk about it on stage about how innovative it was, but then the results just didn't work that well. So that's a tough one. But the thing that came out of it is because we were analyzing all their other data, we found that they actually weren't spending enough money on search ads. There was a lot more elasticity there that they could take advantage of, and so we had to produce a report telling them to buy a product from a different company, which was I think it's good to build our reputation, but not good for business. But sometimes things work out that way. You've got to be aggressive about running a test. It doesn't always work in your favor.
All right, so I've spoken already about A/B testing and about being plagued by self-doubt. So I'm going to continue on both of those themes. And I'm going to describe there are these tombs of the unknown soldier in various cities around the country. Well, I'm going to sing a sort of death song for the unknown false positive. It's kind of a statistics thing. So in A/B testing, you think about statistical significance of your results and confidence. And it's fairly common to decide that 95% is enough confidence to move forward with the results of what you are doing. And as I said before, we work on very simple mathematics at Wayfair, as at most e-commerce companies. So we measure things like conversion rate. And say you're doing a test, it looks good, and it improves conversion rate by X%, and you're Wayfair, you're selling, we're close to $1 billion in revenue now. That's a lot of couches and chairs and other stuff that we sell. And say you have on your wall a sort of a thermometer or a gauge of some kind that's expressing how many tests you've done after you run all these tests all year, and how much you extrapolate the improvement in average order value or conversion rate over everything you're doing. And you say, wow, look at that. We've got this gauge and it's going, all the way up. And you know what? Among those tests that are leading to this alleged massive rise in revenue, and actually, 55% growth, that's fantastic. There are actually some big winners, and those are the ones that actually scare me, especially if there's one big winner. Because if my statistics are correct and I run enough tests, 1 in 20 is incorrect, right? So if the 1 in 20 that's incorrect is the biggest winner, then I have this gauge that's completely wrong. So my only check against that is just to sort of count the money at the end of the year and see that we are moving in the right direction. So that's my death song for the unknown false positive.
There's a poem in there someplace, I think.
I think
we're working
so.
on, so.
I'm not going to write that poem.
Yeah.
Somebody should.
I'm mindful of time, and there were at least another half dozen questions. We could go all night, but what I'd like to do is ask one more question of each of the panelists and then open it up for questions. And so the question that we thought we'd end with here this evening was actually going to be where you learn, right? What sources you go to, what people you learn from. If each of you could offer 1 or 2 places that you found, either long-term or in the past year that you found like the greatest sort of sources of wisdom and ideas, coming from, that would be great. I'm always on the hunt for good new sources to learn from, so including panels like this, but.
Sure. So I'll just say, I hire a lot of physicists and I read physicists. So Philip Janert is one, who's a really good physicist by training and data analyst, writes a lot of books. They're about topics that you wouldn't think have anything to do with marketing analytics, but then surprisingly do once you read them. And Wes McKinney.
Yeah, I've been figuring it out as I go along. But two people I like in the industry, this guy DJ Patil, who's wrote a lot of good writing about how you build data science teams and how you organize them and good first principles. Another guy I follow who posts a lot on Quora is Paco Nathan, who's it's called Evil Mad Scientist, and he has a lot of great stuff. I find them both really useful resources to learn from. But, you know, like this is all developing. Right. We all have to help each other.
I'm often so fatigued by sort of the marketing hype that I and others put out that I take refuge in something more sort of substantial. So I've become very interested in sort of the history of technology and how it shows up from medieval times to now. And so one book which I read last year, which I would highly encourage you to read if you're interested in technology, is a book called Medieval Technology and Social Change. You would be shocked at how the word technology is actually defined and what technology is. So let me ask you a quick question. How many years do you think it took for people to invent the saddle, but before they invented the stirrup? It took them 800 years to figure that out. And that the invention of the stirrup completely changed medieval Europe. And you should read this book to figure out exactly what happened. So, you know, technology arises in all kinds of places. So it's really interesting to see that what we are doing, even though it's technology, it's very similar in spirit to someone inventing a stirrup 1,000 years ago. So I find that literature really interesting and actually quite inspiring as well. In terms of a day-to-day sort of machine learning, data mining blog, there's a blog called WinVector, W-I-N, Vector, sorry, not Victor, Vector, WinVector, which I find to be very sort of grounded and very insightful often. So I would refer you to that.
I would say, I mean, not to be cheeky, but I learn a lot from our customers. So I spend most of my time, I mean, a big part of you know, building a company or being entrepreneurial is good pattern recognition. So I kind of spend a lot of time talking to and listening to as many customers as I can, trying to ask smart questions, and then tease out what they're really looking for and what those patterns seem to be across large sets of customers. And usually those insights are ahead of, well, I was going to say they're ahead of what I read in other books. They're not always ahead, but sometimes being ahead is too far ahead is bad. So timing is one of the biggest problems. So if you listen really carefully and you get the timing right, then that's kind of half that, and luck are a big part of success.
Great, terrific. And for my part, I will put in a shameless plug for Judah. I actually sincerely feel like I've learned a lot from him over the past number of years here. You can tell pretty coming out of a lot of practitioner, hard-gained wisdom in that way. So, that I thought what we'd do now is maybe just open it up and take a few questions, and I'll stroll through as well and let people kind of over here. What's your name?
Bridge with Actionable Analytics. So what the panel said about people not having time for analytics rings true, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in that. So on the one hand, there are like dashboards and those kinds of analytics. On the other hand, there are targeted lists, scores. And so how does acceptance change with respect to the type of analytics? And secondly, is that related to like lack of buy-in at the beginning of the project? Like when the analytics project was started, were there stakeholders from different parts of the company, and is that one of the missing things?
Which one of you wants to tackle that one?
Yeah, I can offer a quick comment. So I think it's some other things that people talk about, finding the right people. So a lot of them are short staff. And in our case, especially in the early days, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, mobile apps was still a little bit of an unknown. So we spent a lot of time looking for that kind of champion or visionary inside an organization who was willing to really drive and push it. But they're really busy too. So I think a lot of it comes down, even with the best intentions, to people being busy. And a big challenge in as an analytics company, and yeah, you can't give people too many knobs, and you want to make it easy to use. And we're trying to bring most of our customers are very, very large, right? Like eBay and Microsoft and ESPN and folks. But we want to make the same kind of insights and marketing automation available to smaller businesses, which means you need to take some of the time out of it. They're not going to have massive teams. It's going to be some guy who's doing it as part of his job. I think it's the consumerization of this makes it a lot easier to use, and that can help address some of those challenges or barriers.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. Like, if it's so you mentioned like ranked scores, right? The challenge is like, is that's pretty actionable. Depending on, is there a place where those can be cut and paste into, right? Or is there a button to just do it, right? I think it's not a matter of lack of buy-in. It's just lack of almost like forethought. Like, what are we going to do with these things? Like, we want all these reports, but like they haven't thought through the amount of effort it would take to do something with it, and they haven't allocated the time. I think that's part of the problem. But maybe it's unreasonable to ask. Like, I think, you know, one of the things we're trying to do at DataZoo is just make that not hard. Make it not hard to use the analytics. I mean, there's still a need, there's definitely a need for analytics for exploration. There's going to be like new findings. Like you need to be able to look at things and see something you didn't realize was going to happen before. But there's also, the majority of analytics are very routine. And you know what you would do if you saw them, but then you don't have time to do it. So I think it's more than just buy-in. It's almost like you have to have an action plan. Like, what are you gonna hire 5 people to do stuff with analytics? Like, they just don't expect the magic to happen after analytics show up. And that's probably why in the presentation people don't feel like they're getting value out of analytics. They're just getting the report, but then it just piles up on their desk, right?
Who else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge for everyone. You know, we've kind of risen to that in the just recently. It's like, look, we realize people can't use these analytics. They asked for them, they wanted them, we built them exactly how they asked for it. And that it's telling them really interesting stuff, and they can't actually do anything. You know, it's going to depend on what you're producing. But I think it's like on the way to producing the report or before, like don't think about producing actionable analytics. Think about all the way to the end. Like, what's going to have to be done to action it, and maybe it's prepping people for that so they understand and they allocate resource for it or systems. Or maybe there's a way you can automate the output of your tool to say, hey, here's the automatic thing, one button, go, right? It's I think that's, like, we've evolved a long way in analytics. We're all very good at it, but then, you know, action is the next step.
Just wanted to add something to that, Cesar, if I may.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the problem, in my opinion, is that there are 2 distinct tasks that get mixed in together into a report. And one task is problem solving, right? You have a specific problem in mind, you want to solve it. You want to collect data to be able to solve it, or go after an opportunity. The other thing is sort of, you know, just casual, not casual, but perhaps unaided exploration. You just sort of explore the data, you try to figure out if there's an opportunity there that you can go after. And I think what happens is that when you have a report, you're trying to do double duty at once. You want the report to help you solve the problem. You also want the report to help you figure out surface some interesting opportunities. And I think that's oftentimes doomed to fail. And I think you need to keep them very distinct. You know, I also think that analytics is basically reporting made sexy. Right? So what you really want to do is to take the report and say, look, the report tells us a bunch of things, and it can only do so much. And be very clear as to what you're using the report for. Very oftentimes people don't have a clear view, so they just throw the kitchen sink into the report. And then it becomes unusable for most people because they're just faced with a wall of data. So I think distinguishing between problem solving and the data to support that, and exploration for opportunity identification, keeping that distinct in your head, I think is really important.
I think back here, Erica. Introduce yourself and ask away.
Hi, Erica Seidel. I'm an executive recruiter focusing on marketing analytics. And so I'm curious, from a talent perspective, how have you applied your predictive and analytic capabilities to identifying who's going to be a good fit on your teams, if at all?
That's a great question, Erica. It's so important a task. Do not leave it to analytics. You know, seriously, because, you know, obviously if you're at the scale of Microsoft or Google, you need to automate some of these things because otherwise you can't hire people fast enough. But if you're a startup in particular, I think you need to be super careful about who you hire. You do not want to trust everything to the numbers. You really want to go with common sense. And that's the recommendation I have. That said, I just want to add one other thing, which is that in all my experience hiring analytically savvy people, by far the best academic background for this stuff is experimental particle physics. And I kid you not, clearly there are not that many of them, but it also makes them easy to find because they're also sort of unemployable. So of all the people I've hired, the people who had experimental particle physics backgrounds were by far the best in working with data. Because even finding something like the Higgs boson, you're not really looking for the boson, you're looking for some little bump in some probability function somewhere. And that's exactly the kind of thing you do all day when you're doing machine learning and data mining. So that's my piece of advice, like the graduate, experimental particle physics.
Excellent. We have another question over here. Or sorry, did you want to tackle that one, Bill?
No.
Okay. All right. Good. Sorry, your name and ask a question.
Hi, I'm Chaitanya from Perceptive Analytics. My question is, what is the biggest data analytics problem that you're trying to solve, either for yourself or for your customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit in the keynote, is this omni-channel problem, right? So what things have really changed in marketing in the last, I don't know, even you could say 7 or 8 years, is that instead of the past, marketers were used to like, well, there's only like 3 major networks, so if I put my ad on TV, you're bound to see it. These days, the people have DVRs, they skip the ads, they change the channel, there's like 300, 800, I don't know how many channels on cable, it's ridiculous. Like, it's very hard to force a consumer to do anything. The big challenge is that, and then furthermore, they're not just on their computer, they're on their mobile phone, their tablet, their Kindle, they're, all over the place. So this sort of how to solve this omni-channel problem. They may see an ad on their tablet and then go in the store, and then they go, it's a big challenge. And so there's a lot of, people touting that they have the answer, but and we do too, of course, but there's only a few ways to do it, and mostly you're back to inference methods in the end. I mean, the only people that really have a login across things is Google, maybe Facebook. If you sign in your TV to Facebook, I don't know. Some people do that, but it's a challenging problem, and it's still under a lot of research, but it's very important for marketing so people can understand what marketing is working.
Got time for one more? Anybody else want to get in? Sorry, over here. Sorry. There you go.
I have a question for Bill. I consider analytics is a scientific process, but do you ever experience that somewhere it failed and it produced some unnecessary information which you could not use for your client, and how you deal with that situation? Did you ever experience that?
Is you're saying, is there like output that doesn't make sense, or?
Yeah, in simple words, when analytics fails, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm kind of an odd duck in that I am like not pigeonholed too well into the scientist role, or I've always seen there's this blend between human intuition and data science, and I know that's weird as a analyst guy that's all about automation, but there's times when the analytics just doesn't have enough data. Maybe you didn't do it right. Maybe you just didn't pivot it or prep it, or maybe it's telling you a story that's just not. It just doesn't ring true, right? And so you always need a blend, which you may need to fall back. You always need to question what it's telling you, and say, if this doesn't make sense, I got to go with my gut. And you may be wrong, you may be right, but you have to. You develop this sense of like, noticing the times when it's just telling you the wrong story. So you still need humans in the loop to check things, but because we have this inherent ability to pattern match, which sometimes misleads us, but you need to have that. I don't have the fundamental answer to that, but I know that when my team presents something that looks wrong, I just know it, and then you just keep digging and you find out why. Like it just pops out at you. I don't know how, but it's intuition.
Great. All right.
If I may add,
Rami, please do. Yeah.
I think it's a really important question. In my experience, I find that 99 times out of 100, when the data tells me something that's not intuitive, the data is wrong. It doesn't lead to some blinding counterintuitive thing that nobody has ever figured out. The data is usually wrong. There's a bug in the data or there's a bug in the software. Or something has gone wrong somewhere. So I would say that when you encounter something that just sort of looks odd, it's much more likely to be a problem on your side than for it to be something novel. So I would really adhere to that principle because it'll save you from a lot of heartache down the road.
Can I just say, just to that point, for my own part, I think I've tried to become very sensitive to the opposite problem. You know, when the data just confirms everything I think I know, right? And I'm not getting challenged enough by the analysis, right? Because inherently there should be some messiness around the edges, distributions a little broader than what I assume to be the truth. And for me, one of the best books that I've read in the last couple of years has been the Daniel Kahneman book, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Thinking Fast and Slow. Just a wonderful inventory of all the different ways that we get biased and need to adjust our thinking to sort of control for those things. I think you know, the experience at the opposite end for me is the big concern, is just, you know, seeing too much that I agree with. So anyway, let me leave it at that. Let's first of all, big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. And also thanks to Josh for introducing us, and to Vishal for everything, and again to Judah for his comments earlier tonight. This is a terrific, terrific session. I'm very grateful to have the chance to be with all these folks here tonight. So thanks.